Hello, welcome to KPFK's Local Station Board Debate number 4. I am joined by Michelle Manos, Jan Goodman, Steve Kaiser, and Douglas Barnett. And each of them will now have 1 minute to present themselves, beginning with Steve Kaiser.
Hi, I'm Steve Kaiser. I've been on the local station board for 3 years. It's been a really enlightening experience for me. I showed up with a Pollyannish attitude about how to turn things around, and then I have been dealing with the reality of Pacifica. And I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I've met a lot of very good people and a lot of new friends, and I appreciate that. But I'm here. I'd like to run for another, be on the board for another 3 years because I don't feel my work is done. I think we have to save Pacifica because there's nothing like it in the country as these big organizations, these big conglomerates take over our media and tell us what to think. We have an independent voice at Pacifica, but we have to find new ways of marketing it and come up with new programming that really appeals to people and delivers to them what they need and want to know. So vote for Steve Kaiser.
Thank you. Douglas Barnett?
Been listening to KPFK since the Sudanese Liberation Army debacle of the early 70s. Came on the board in 1999 under the old structure. Been secretary of this board for a 2-year stretch, worked in and out of the station for many hours every week ever since, except currently. Run the Quaker Meeting House with me and my wife in South Central Los Angeles. I've been there 30 years. The Quakers have an ecology reality that goes back 200 or 300 years, and my wife and I were treasurer of the Green Party of California for 6 years just recently. I started an electric car factory in the Valley in 1994-95. My father was discussing ecology as back in the 50s and 60s. I find the station very important. It's unique, it's special, and it's not part of the CPB. It's an educational institution, a nonprofit educational institution, and I want to keep it that way. Our job on the radio station is to deliver education to our listeners. Not listen to them, but listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Goodman?
Hi, I'm Jan Goodman, and I am a lawyer. I'm an activist. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles on 105th and Avalon in a biracial home. My parents were both activists, and I grew up an activist fighting for peace and justice and against racism and my entire life. And KPFK is one of the most important tools in Los Angeles for those struggles. And thus, when KPFK became endangered, I got drawn into the struggle to save KPFK. So I was on the KPFK station board for 6 years, and then I had a 6-year period of doing other things after I termed out. And then 3 years ago, I got pulled back into being on the board, and I am presently on the board, and I'm presently on the Pacifica National Board. Are you indicating that my time is up? Thank you. Jan Goodman.
Thank you. Yes, I actually wasn't clear. I'll do this when you have 10 seconds.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry. Michelle Manos?
Thank you. My name is Michelle Manos. I am a longtime listener of KPFK since I came to Los Angeles about 10 years ago, and I'm a first-time candidate. My background, my undergrad is in political science from Cal State Long Beach, and I have a master's degree from Stanford in African Studies. What I bring to the table is that I have about 6 years in marketing and small business development. A lot of that experience was right here in Los Angeles in Southern California. And part of what I do is community outreach and reaching new people. I did that, I've done that through my activism through the last 5 or 6 years. And really kicked it up a notch with the Bernie 2016 campaign and really became a full-time community organizer, reorganizing my life in order to do this work. And similar to Jan, when I discovered that KPFK was in trouble, I realized that I really had to do something about it. And when I started asking around, what is the best way to do something about it, the local station board was a big part of the answer. So that's why I'm here to help KPFK. Thank you.
Thank you. So just quickly, the format will be I'm going to assign a question. We'll start with Steve Kaiser. He'll have 1 minute to answer this question, and then you'll each subsequently have a minute to respond, and then he will have another minute to respond to your responses. And the questions will be randomly assigned based on a sequence that I generated prior to coming. The first question, which goes to Steve Kaiser, is question number 3, and it is Community Advisory Boards. Only 2 of the 5 Pacifica stations are in compliance with the CPB requirements for having a cab. Do you think that having a functioning cab is necessary? Why or why not? What are the primary roles of a functioning cab? You have 1 minute.
Well, our main problem has been for quite a while is that we're not making enough money to run the station and bring it in. So these other stations not being in compliance with having a cab prevents us from getting an allotment, which has been more than $1 million from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So I think it's critical, but we got so many dysfunctioning things at different stations. I don't know if that's something we can put on the front burner or not. Now, when we've had cab meetings here at KPFK, I remember attending one which really packed the room. There was like 40 or 50 people in it. And I remember I raised my hand to answer a question, but the man that was running it said I couldn't speak because I was on the local station board. But there were plenty of other people there to speak, and they had a lot of good opinions about things. And we need to integrate with our local community so that we bring back the community that made Pacifica great.
Thank you. Douglas?
The CPB is a very late organization for America. KPFK or Pacifica started in '48 with a Ford Foundation grant. Their other grant that year was the Rand Corporation. For 15 years, we did fine without the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and you see a control mechanism come in here. We have to meet certain criteria, et cetera. When that money starts coming in, we begat a mother. There's a good book called When Pacifica Begat Their Mother. The national board became dominant under the CPB and the FCC requirements for a multi-station network, and we've been suffering ever since. I want to see it go away. I'm very happy that it has gone away. And the CPB demand for community assessment is something we haven't really done in 20 years. There have been some attempts. Nice to see it go.
Thank you. Jan?
Well, I think that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has many pros and cons. The biggest pro for Pacifica was that it added about $1 million a year to our budget, which is, as it turns out, about what our shortfall is right now. And we could really use that money. And I kind of disagree with Doug Barnett. I think that some of the requirements that the CPB has of doing community assessments really go along with our mission. And I think we should be doing community assessments. We should be going out into the community and trying to figure out what the community needs along the lines, but being clear of what our mission is. And hopefully in a while I'll be able to talk about what that mission is, because it's really important, and we should be assessing needs of what we can supply along with our mission.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. The community advisory boards, the intention is to make sure that the community has their voice heard. It's my opinion that while this is a good idea, the the local station board has a lot of committees and a lot of folks trying to do a lot of things. Everyone on the team is very committed, and the board is being pulled in many directions. I think the most important thing we can do to make sure the community's voice is heard is streamline these elections. I think that the community deserves elections that are more accessible. I think that KPFK deserves elections that are less expensive and more representative of the listenership. And so I think the time has come to really examine the election process and try to make sure that we're reaching not just our longtime and committed listeners that are going to be with us ride or die, but I think that it's time to make sure that we're reaching, for instance, college students and, for instance, new activists that see communities in the streets and are trying to see how they can get involved and how they can stay informed. KPFK's community calendar is an amazing resource, but there are other ways to keep people involved, and I think that more accessible elections and functioning community advisory boards are both good ways to do that.
Thank you. Steve, you can readdress.
Well, I appreciate what everybody said here, and I think they nailed it. I understand that Doug wants the independence from Corporation of Public Broadcasting, but the only thing that's really critical to us in Pacifica, I think, is not going broke. And the CAB is one of the best ways to get some sort of feedback from the local community about what we're doing right and wrong. And we've had some really vigorous discussions at this local ones that I've had the opportunity to attend. So it is critical. We need to keep it, and we need to get the Corporation for Public Broadcasting money back, and we need to do a lot more beyond that, I would say.
Thank you. So moving on to the next question. This goes to Douglas Barnett, and it's question number 7. How can we make KPFK thrive financially? Think about diversifying funding and moving away from relying primarily on fund drives. Propose alternative fundraising ideas/models. Think about the strategy and timeline for the implementation of your alternatives. You have 1 minute.
Well, I don't think I'd do any of that. We're a radio station. We have 110,000 watts. We have the most effective signal in the Southwest, probably at an elevation of 4,000 to 5,000 feet. We probably cover 50,000 square miles. There's a lot of people in this community who have English as a second language in their home. Probably 40% of LA has English as a second language in their home. They're not likely to watch their phone when the boss is looking. A radio in their pocket is a different thing. It's very cheap, it works every time, and they don't have to have their hands on it. Our pursuing of the net, which I've pursued for a couple of decades, I have domains from the 90s, early 90s, or mid-90s, is a nice thing, but it's not true for all of us in LA. It's not true for everybody in the signal area. I think we need to develop our radio. We really need to cut our overhead. That's the critical way of succeeding financially. I'm of the potlatch nation argument, which is the pursuit of money is an evil in itself, probably doesn't need to happen. I hate to get nasty here, but I think God will handle it if we don't pursue money, and we'll still have money. It's very odd. I've succeeded that way in my life for 70 years.
Thank you. Jan?
Well, I guess I have a very different idea about about finances. I think that what we need to do is to raise money and keep that focus very seriously. I do agree that the most important thing that we can do to raise money is to have an excellent radio station. We need to have higher production values. That is to say, it needs to be easy to listen to KPFK. We need to have programs that are mission-driven. That is to say, that bring information and news to people that they want to hear and they're not available elsewhere. And I have to say that we need to be modern about some of that, and we should be doing text to donate, particularly as a way of getting funds in. As people are listening to programs that they like, they can immediately text in some money. And they should be encouraged to do that.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. I think that sort of using technology in that way is important, part of what I think we need to be doing is increasing the listenership by making people feel involved. I've heard through talking to people about this to prepare for this this event here that an idea to open up some town halls, maybe perhaps on the same day of every month or something like that, to get the community involved and use that opportunity to let folks know that it's a great time to contribute a few dollars. Another way is social media. KPFK is poorly prepared to take on the social media age and is behind. It's a shame to watch because it could be done so much better, and it's a great way to reach people. When we're talking about raising money and getting people involved, what we're really talking about is having people care about KPFK. So what we need is more people who feel represented by KPFK. I agree with the idea that we have listeners that don't speak a lot of English. We perhaps need some more programming that is designed and led and created for non-white people, for young people. And I think that bringing more voices to the table is definitely the way. When the community feels involved with KPFK as an organization, as a mission, then you're going to see people opening their hearts, their minds, their ideas, and their pocketbooks.
Thank you. Steve?
Our current media is controlled by a half a dozen gargantuan conglomerates which deliver pre-digested thought and tell people how to think in very subtle ways. What we have here is an opportunity for people to become informed on what the issues are and what's going on so that they can get a kind of truth that resonates with their authentic self. So what I propose is a campaign to bring back the truth. I think the truth should get another shot. It might be a better way to live than, the dictates of truthful hyperbole. And there are two basic ways, very important ways to do that. We need to solicit tastefully our really well-heeled contributors and supporters so that we can retire the threatening debt that we have now. And the other thing that's been bringing in money over the years is the premiums during our fund drives. So we need bigger and better premiums, maybe dealing with these great investigative reporters that we have all over the country and the world, bringing them in here, doing events with them, and then distributing their DVDs and books through our premiums. And that will create the sort of cash flow that can sustain us into the future.
Thank you. Douglas, you can re-respond.
The 1934 Communications Agreement, or law, that created radio in America, created the left end of the dial. The left end of the dial was unique in that it wasn't religious, it was educational. What happened under the Reagan administration is he broke that by allowing the left stations on that end of the FM dial to sell part of their signal. We've been selling, Pacifica has been selling each of their signals, 4 of the 5 signals, as a sub-channel. We've been selling our sub-channel to the Koreans for a decade. That's big money, and that's basically what supports our national office. I don't like to see a national office that tells us what to do. I'd rather see 5 local stations tell the national office what our plans are. What I want to see also is that the left end of the sub-channel be used as a radio frequency browser. So you don't have to go to your digital provider, you don't have to go to your cable, you don't have to go to Wi-Fi, but you can literally tune your device to KPFK as a digital signal, as a web signal.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, and this question goes to Jan Goodman. What should be the LSB's primary roles and responsibilities? What should be the PNB's primary roles and responsibilities? Who should be on the LSB? Who should be on the PNB? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all of what the LSB's responsibilities are and what the PNB's responsibilities are clearly laid out in the bylaws. And basically, the role of the LSB is to elect people to the national board and to evaluate management, the program director, and the general manager. And then the P&B's role is to set policy for the national network. And I want to address what Doug Barnett said a second ago, and it's very important. Pacifica has 5 stations and about 300 affiliates. And as opposed to what Doug just said, I think it's extremely important that Pacifica start acting like a network. If this network decided to start programming and sending messages, the truth, to this country, and as a network, we would be the most powerful network in this country. And that is one of the things that I think that we should be doing, and not being independent little stations. We're a multi-million-dollar network, and we should act like it.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. The local station board, in my opinion, should be made up of people from any faction of society who care about independent media and the type of messaging that KPFK has been committed to. Personally, myself, as I said, I've been in Los Angeles about 10 years. As I saw my activism grow, at the same time, I saw KPFK declining. As I was turning to KPFK more for more and more news and more places to be around the Southern California region, I found, quality of programming that was declining in the face of what the community was asking for. I think that there was recently a wave of people that came into the progressive movement. The progressive movement has had many waves, right, over the years, over the decades. The most recent one being the Bernie Sanders movement, in my opinion, followed shortly by Standing Rock. And I think that what we need is the people who have been committed to these new fights for justice, these new ways of going about the struggle, to come in and be part of this organization, because KPFK and Pacifica are crucial nationwide to our movement for progressivism and for justice. But we are losing the battle to be sustainable because we are committed to old ways that are no longer working. And so the local station board and the Pacifica National Board should be made up of people who give a crap about that and are willing to do something about it.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I've been kind of surprised at how ineffectual the LSB has been. They seem to be, and I think they came about as an attempt to democratize Pacifica in the 90s. But they seem to be detached, and the primary role I see is electing representatives to the national board, where the real power seems to exist. We don't get interaction with the top management of the board. They don't come to our meetings, or at least rarely. So I would think the LSB more of a sounding board to be to bridge the gap between the public and who's actually managing the station. And I don't see any reason not to pare the board down to a more effective size, to instead of 24, have 20 representatives in each of the stations. So I would like the LSB to have more power, to have more input, but it seems to be that the things exist in certain sectors in like the KPFK environment, and there just isn't that interflow of people and ideas and feedback.
Thank you. Douglas?
In the late 90s, the rap music that Los Angeles was hearing was coming through KDAY, KDAY, a station that was only allowed to broadcast in the daytime, thus the name. Rap was very political, very political. In '89, the FBI sent KDAY a letter which said that they had to cut back on their rap music. They had to specifically cut back on body count and cop killer and all the things that we're now hearing about with the black movement. The manager was so upset that he read the FBI letter on the station for about a week. And then Fred Sands bought the station for $7.2 million, and that was the end of political rap. The rest of what we've heard is basically what Wall Street and what the music industry wants us to hear, which is a lot of very sexist bullshit. I was on a bus last night. There was a man rapping to the bus. and it was terrifying. There's nothing he said that I haven't heard on modern rap music, and yet it was terrifying. I was looking pretty big, and I had a big pair of shoes, and he got calmed down when we came aboard. And one of the little girls thanked me as she left because I was pushing back without saying a word. What has happened to our communities in South Central with the modern music, the post-FBI letter, is really injurious.
Thank you. Jan, you have another minute.
Oh. So looking at what our LSB could be, I think one of the problems with our governance is that it's sort of a little somewhat random as to who can run and what kind of a board we have, because we don't have, as most boards do, we have anybody can run, which on the one hand is very democratic, but on the other hand, we don't have the ability to say, you know, we need somebody who has more media experience. We need somebody who has more accounting experience. We need somebody who has more radio experience on the board. So one idea along these lines is to have slotted positions on the board that says, okay, we're going to have, you can run for an activist slot, you can run for an accounting slot, you can run for a lawyer spot, for whatever things that we feel that we need on our board, so we have a broader board. That's just one idea. It's an idea that our new executive director Maxie Jackson, brought as a thought. And I think it's a really good idea that we should be really thinking about how we can have a broad board, but that brings people with skills to the board, because we're acting so much like a book club on who can be on the boards, and not like a multi-million-dollar corporation, radio corporation, which is who we are. And we need people to take this board very seriously. So I'm hoping that during this next period, we can start revisioning our boards and keep them democratic, keep people involved, but have a broad, diverse group of people with many skills. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question goes to Michelle.
And my name is Jan Goodman, by the way.
It is number 5, and it's what can be done to increase listenership among KPFK's and Pacifica's audience? How will you ensure KPFK continues to grow and change in order to meet the ever-changing needs of the community? Think about strategies for identifying and engaging underserved communities. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. My response first, I wanted to sort of address the gentleman's comments about hip-hop and South Central Los Angeles. I wasn't sure of the intention of the comments, because when I first started listening, I thought we were going to go in the direction of KPFK being a space for minority voices, in particular Black voices here in Los Angeles. I thought perhaps we were about to talk about having space at KPFK for more political rep, as you put it. So I think that is the direction I would love to see those types of comments go in, and that's the kind of thing that I would like to bring to KPFK is more handing over of the space to the people who actually live in the community and who know what direction the progressive movement and the movement for justice need to be going in right now. I think that KPFK, as we've all agreed, I think has the ability to be a resource, and perhaps has lost its way in some of that. So the ways that we can reach out to the community are to actually be a part of the community. The town halls that I suggested, a recommendation of a friend of mine, I think would be a fantastic way to actually invite people to the table to talk about what they want from KPFK. A community advisory board perhaps is a different way of going about that, and in my mind doesn't sound like something I'm invited to. But a town hall is definitely something I'm invited to as a member of the community. And so when we talk about, the conditions of different communities around Los Angeles, underserved communities, communities that have been gentrified, communities that have had their homes and their education and their decent grocery stores stripped away, I think rather than point to those communities and demand that they tell us, what's wrong and things like that, I think that, bringing them to the table and perhaps, handing those spaces over completely and saying, this is a space to hear what the community needs from KPFK and the larger mission that we're all engaged in. I think many of our hosts and many of our participants in the KPFK organization are activists at heart and are struggling for justice at heart. And I think that there is a time and a place, and that time and that place is right now and right here to hand this space over and make it more about the community.
Thank you. Steve Kaiser?
Oh, I guess this was my question originally, wasn't it? Well, I agree with everybody saying here about it being, it needs to be democratic still. And I like what Jan was saying about having people run for certain sort of positions so that we have an array of skills on the board. We need more savvy radio people that really know the industry. We need better managers. I would like to run for the accounting position, being a CPA myself, but we need firmer controls. And I think things have turned around in a very good way because we've had those good controls since basically the candidate slate has prevailed in this sort of internal wars, that we've turned around a lot about what's going on and saved Pacifica. But in order to get it out into the community more, I think we need to be dealing with more relevant information that people aren't getting elsewhere, which is one of our prime directives of Pacifica.
Thank you. Steve? Oh, sorry. Douglas?
15 years ago, I was putting 1,000 people a month through my meeting house. I'd been on the board about 5 years when I talked Sojourner Truth into getting a microphone at KPFK. She had rented an office there for 15 years, and her voice wasn't very loud. She went to the UN, she went to the Women's Conference in Beijing in the mid-90s, but no one would listen. And so our radio station is extremely effective for those problems in which it chooses to address. I'm very glad that Ralph Nader finally has a daytime slot. That's been a long time coming. Ralph Nader irritates a lot of people on the brown side and the black side. It irritates communists no end because he seems to support capitalism and invest heavily in capitalism. I've invested heavily in capitalism and found myself wanting. It doesn't quite work for me, but I support it very strongly. I don't support the Marxist view because, well, I can't see it ever working. One of the things I found as I run the meeting house as a janitor for the last 30 years is the anarchists clean up after themselves. They lock the doors, they turn the lights off, and they make sure the food's back in the refrigerator. And the chosen ones, or the, whatever they call themselves, the vanguard, they just leave the front door open. It's astounding. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Where are we now? I really have lost track of where we are.
What can be done to increase listenership among KPFK's and Pacifica's audiences?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first thing to increase listenership is to have high-quality programming. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is to make the programs listenable, no matter who is talking. And what that may mean is if you have a bunch of young people who aren't used to broadcasting, it's very important to hear those voices. Maybe they need to be highly edited so that once they're on the air and people are listening to them, maybe we edit out the giggling or the laughing or the lots of things that are distracting on radio. So what we need, the first thing, is very listenable programming. And we need programming that is telling the truth and information that people want and need. That is how we improve the programming. And it can be in many directions. It can be, I loved listening to the local news on the way home. We don't get enough of that. We need to expand our local news. We need to have more news. I am of the news variety of listener, news, current events, and analysis. But there are people who listen to KPFK for the music, and so it's important to have alternative music also.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. I think that streamlining programming is very important. The idea that you can tune in and a certain time of the day during a weekday and know what you're going to get, especially during drive time. Predictable but engaging programming is going to be extraordinarily important. My background in small business marketing and local small business development has taught me a lot about how to be in touch with the community and how to determine the ways in which someone from this segment or that segment of society or industry can reach their constituency. Whether you're a small business or like KPFK, a radio station, trying to increase listenership, the most important thing is to have people on the team who have their finger on the pulse of what's in demand right now. The programming at KPFK, unfortunately, much of it is highly unlistenable. Much of it, I'm the type of person that will persist through a fund drive. I'll listen, I'm one of those. And still, I find it incessant. I find it, it's happening far too often. My favorite people in the world, that are on air regularly, I cringe when I hear them have to go through that, my good friend Alan Minsky, I want to hear his analysis. I don't necessarily want to hear him pitching the next DVD. His voice is so important, as are many of our hosts and the people who participate on the airwaves. And so, I know that it's not the most popular, and I know that a lot of our funding and our hard dollars do come from those fund drives. I think there are other ways to increase listenership. And again, it's about engaging people and having people who want to support KPFK rather than sort of convincing them to spend money because they're going to get a prize. I think we get longer term commitment out of people if we have an organization that they believe in.
Thank you. And the next question is number 9, and it goes to Steve Kaiser. How do you suggest that KPFK evaluate programs and make decisions to change programs? Do you think that this process can be improved, and in what way? Who should decide which programs be taken off or put on the air? You have 1 minute.
Well, this is a particularly tough one. I was on the Program Oversight Committee for a while, and the members of the committee didn't show up. Alan Minsky was going to evaluate and get back to us on evaluating all the program directors. That never happened. So there doesn't seem anything we have that can actually do this. But it is absolutely critical. The whole story is that, like Jan was saying, it's all about the programming. We've got great programs, and we come up with great programs. It's unpredigested thought. It's something to resonate with people authentically, to give them the truth. And I don't know how to do this, but one person should not be determining what goes on the air like the program director has been doing here and like Alan did for 9 years. And we got a new program director. I think he's very insightful. We need clever people that with radio experience and can really objectively evaluate. And the number one thing is it's getting listenership, because we haven't had that. Now, when we brought on Tom Hartman, that created a great spike in our listenership, but we're at least not at the bottom anymore. We spiked up to like a third way up.
Thank you. Douglas?
It's a governance problem. The bylaws, as written and approved in 2003, were structured so that our local station board, which is a committee of the national board now, frustratingly, is made up of different community representatives. A large board, each one elected from their own constituency. That's the theory. But of the 5 stations, we have a huge amount of employees. We have, I think, 22 to 23 effective full-time employees, which is a lot more than that because some of those employees are not full-time. Those people don't care what governance says. They decide. That's the problem. That structure that came out in the bylaws in 2003 has never really been implemented because we have a massive hole in the bucket called an excess of employees. KPFT in Houston, I think, is running on about 12 employees. WPFW in Washington is running on less than that. We won't even talk about New York. I don't know where they stand at this point. But my point is those people who are in the station who put that on their resume and wear it around their neck like bling, I work for KPFK, are the deciders, not the governance, and that has to change.
Thank you. Jen?
Well, actually, the bylaws indicate that the local station board, neither the local station board nor the national board is supposed to be making decisions about programming. It's supposed to be the program director and the general manager. But I do think that Doug is not wrong when he says that the staff really has great influence about it. But I think as we stand, that in terms of evaluating program, what the local station board is supposed to do is supposed to set policy. And I think that when we're just talking about policy, that we have to have a balance between how much the program fulfills our mission, that is to say, getting information, basically getting information out and getting alternative music and programming out, and how much funding the programs bring in. So, and the quality of the program and how many people listen to the program. So all of those things need to be assessed jointly. And there may be some programs that don't bring any money, but it's very important for us to carry them. But those would be a very few programs. But then there are other programs that we should not be just selling fairy dust, essentially, because it brings in money. Everything needs to be mission driven. Thank you. Jan Goodman.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. The programming at KPFK should not be all up to one person. I do agree with that. However, the program director does have a job, and that job is to evaluate based on many of the different things that my fellow candidates up here have mentioned regarding how much money something brings in, the listenership, the commitment to the mission of KPFK, and so forth. The idea that we make decisions based on the finances, it gets us very far away from our mission very quickly. And so, of course, the programming has to be, one way to kind of put it is that we want each show to be able to at least sustain itself. That would be ideal. But what we're really talking about is the sustaining of KPFK. And if we get too far off our mission, if, my co-candidate over here brought up the word capitalism. Anybody who knows me knows that I am not a big fan of capitalism. I think that, we are all on sort of a mission to find what's going to come after capitalism. KPFK has the opportunity to be on the forefront of that kind of mission and, restructure itself in a way that enables us to not spend our lives chasing the almighty dollar, but actually stay close to our mission, stay close to the community, stay close to providing the service in the community that KPFK has been known for in the past and could be known for again.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, we need a cleaning of house here, and I think we're undergoing it currently. There's a lot of people at KPFK that have felt and acted like they have owned their slots for years, and there's been no real judgment of that, a real evaluation of that, to see whether they are effective in the community or carrying on our mission. So Kevin Fleming's the new program director. I have a lot of faith in him. He's got a lot of experience with radio, and I think he's very clear about what needs to be done. But we need something more than just a few people determining what goes on the air. The program director and the general manager aren't enough, and the LSB should be giving good feedback on that. But there's just, we spin off in one direction, and the management spins off in another direction, and occasionally we may touch ground together, but we need to be integrated with them and have them hear our advice and help in that respect. But number one is the programming. Number two is better premiums, because the premiums we're offering are hitting saturation and people aren't buying them anymore. And I forgot number three. Anyway, that's up for me.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. This is for Douglas. It's question 8. The vast majority of programming on KPFK is produced by unpaid staff. What are the pros and the cons of this? How can this structure be improved? You have 1 minute.
One of the most dangerous things that happened in the 90s was that we put in strip programming. It was trickled down from the CPB. Yes, it works very well in your car. If at 5 o'clock you expect to hear the same voice, it's a wonderful model for 90% of the radio stations in America. There's over 300 radio stations in US and Canada that use 90.7 as their broadcast frequency. Do we care? No. Do we know it? No. Do we care what the rest of the radio stations? We're competing against 60 channels nominally before the internet came along in this signal area. 60 different possibilities. Not all of those in your car, but you get my point. I want to differentiate KPFK. And the way we do that is our program director is a traffic cop. He doesn't decide where I'm going. He just tries to keep the flow going so it works. I trust that in this gravity well of talent called Los Angeles, where everyone from Idaho to Iowa comes here because they were the best in their high school, we've got tons of talent. And I think we can hold that talent up to a microphone and get good radio.
Thank you. Jan?
So the question is the pros and cons of having volunteers. I love having volunteers at the station. We have so much talent in Los Angeles that, and people willing to put in the time and energy to produce radio. The problem that we sometimes have is that some of those people don't have the skills to put together a radio program that is perfectly listenable. So it's very important to have staff, and those could be volunteers also, but more likely they're going to be paid people editing and making those programs listenable if they're not listenable. And usually you don't have a volunteer that can volunteer for more than an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours a week. And I think it's very important, and not only do I think, but practice has shown, it's very important to have consistency. And therefore, it's a good idea to have some paid staff and some volunteers.
Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. I think that volunteers at KPFK are a beautiful thing. I personally have been a member of the unpaid staff at KPFK in the past, and I'm very proud of that. I have friends that are currently part of the unpaid staff at KPFK, and they are extraordinarily committed. In fact, some of them, are putting in 15, 20 hours a week if they can. But it's an uphill struggle. The idea that we're going to bring in unpaid, perhaps unskilled or untrained volunteers who just love KPFK and appreciate the mission and want to help and are interested perhaps in radio and media in some way, that's a beautiful thing. But getting them trained up to the point of, someone who would submit a resume and be hired is a totally different thing. And it's unfair to the permanent staff at KPFK to have this sort of high volume of turnover when it comes to people that they're trying to train, people that they're putting their energy and their sort of blood, sweat, and tears into again and again, to have them sort of go away because their life gets too busy. What we need is, an open volunteer process, absolutely, because again, I think perhaps what we've learned about me today is that I believe in the community and the voices of the community. But I also believe that we have to honor and value the people that have dedicated their lives to journalism and to broadcast and to production, and ensure that those people are taken care of, ensure that their efforts are not wasted on people who are going to leave as soon as something else comes along. So it's definitely a balance. But as someone who has been involved with KPFK for many years, I really want to see the people that have dedicated their lives to this organization be taken care of, and I want to see volunteers be treated as, members of the family and members of the team.
Thank you. Steve?
Oh, that was well said, Michelle. I appreciate what you're saying there. It's a matter of community, and I don't really know how to bring in more listenership except by better programming, which I think we're finally getting, and dealing with the issues and dealing with the truth, because I'm really positively livid about what's being represented as the truth nowadays. And I really mean it. We need to have a campaign to bring back the truth on all levels, because it just seems even the culture is getting more corrupt by, it doesn't really hold to real essential values. And I don't know if I'm addressing the question right or not.
So the question actually is question 8. It's about the vast majority of programming on KPFK is produced by unpaid staff.
Right.
That's fine.
So, and it is, and I agree. It's a matter of community, about bringing these people in, giving them the experience with the radio, and we need that, but we need professionals because they've done well. I mean, the strip programming has its faults, but it's commanded a lot of attention, and people will tune into us when that's going on because they want to hear these people and the program they produce for the day.
Thank you. Douglas, you can readdress.
There was a newspaper headlines in 1945 in Queensland, Australia, that 1 to 2 million people in Tokyo had died in a single night, March 10th of 1945. My wife and I put a program together about that on the anniversary. That has nothing to do with atomic bombs, by the way. That number has reduced to about 80,000 now, according to the professionals. And my wife and I got zero help from staff to put that program together. We added probably another 3 or 4 weeks to get an hour program done, because the staff, who I think we've hired in order to help volunteer programmers, they don't seem to think that. I don't know what they think, but they don't do that. That's my experience, 15, 20 years in the station.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, and this question is for Jan. It's question, oh, sorry, did I lose track here? Okay, yeah. It's question number 1. And what should be the LSB's primary roles and responsibilities?
I answered that.
Oh, wait. Oh, really? Oh, we did that one already. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're to number 11. Okay, all right, number 11. Okay, should the LSB involve itself in programming? Describe the extent of this involvement and the pros and the cons. You have 1 minute.
Actually,
Do you want to?
we talked about that one already.
Sure.
So let's do another one.
What suggestions do you have for further development of KPFK social media, Area 941 podcast library, and the KPFK video channel?
Well, we have a studio that we built out at KPFK so that we can produce video, and I think, and we should be using that, because lots of people like to watch video. Lots of people still like to listen to radio, but there's no reason that we should not be producing video broadcasts also. And that would tie in very well with social media, because we could be live streaming many of our programs. And for a lot of people, especially younger people, it could draw them in. And every event that we do, we should be live streaming those events. We had Greg Palast. We live streamed that. Of course, he brought in all the people who follow him, and it was incredible. But we need to be really focusing on using social media, using every available technique to get more people watching and listening to KPFK. And I just want to mention that our mission is not just to get truth out, but it's also to bring to the fore the causes of friction and conflict among people and races and the solutions to those problems. And we do focus on that, and we need to focus more on it now more than ever. And I think that will also bring in people.
Thank you. Michelle?
I'm so glad that we're on this question. It's been a blind spot at KPFK and even perhaps in this debate regarding social media. I'm one of the co-founders of California for Progress and Bernie's Coffee Shop. I was also on the team that did the Real Justice Rally with Bernie, and then a month later, the luncheon and the series of events with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You may have also seen some of my work with my colleagues at Humanity First when we protested the GEO group, the group that profits off of caging children. And also you may have seen the work that we did on 9/11 at the Metro Detention Center, where we shut down all 3 entrances of the Metro Detention Center for the entire day. And we blocked buses, and we demanded many things, and most importantly, we had our voices heard. All of that was possible through social media. All of that attention that we were able to get, all of the attendees, for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's luncheon, all of the tickets that we were able to sell, all of the commitments that we were able to get from the community regarding resources to make those events happen, because we are grassroots and we operate on almost no money all of the time. All of that is possible through social media. And if KPFK really wants to tap into where people are donating their money, where people are finding out where to be, where people are tuning into videos, where people are learning about what's going on right now, and also where people are steering themselves away from this minute-to-minute anti-Trump stuff and really getting to the core of what our issues are in our communities, the ideas are happening on social media. And if we want to talk about what we can do with some of our unpaid staff and some of our volunteers at KPFK, social media is a place where young people are thriving. Millennials and younger are just stunningly adept at social media, and it's a huge missed opportunity to have the hosts who have been doing their programming for 5, 10, 20 years, and that's what they're good at, trying to make them learn social media. That's not necessarily fair. We can bridge the gap by bringing some people who care about KPFK around the college age into the studios and onto the computers and get them posting, get them live streaming, and get people engaging with KPFK on social media. And I'm not talking just likes. I'm talking actual engagement on social media. It's possible.
Thank you. Steve?
We've been needing to bring in the millennials in a big way, and this has been something we've discussed often, because most of the personnel around KPFK are aging baby boomers like myself. So it's critical to bring them in, and like Michelle so eloquently just expressed, that's where they're hanging out. It's in social media and on podcasts. Now, I'm heartened in talking to Aniel Fields and Kevin Fleming yesterday about how they're really into bringing podcasts mainstream to KPFK, so that we can have that window, that outlet, and that content with people. And we may want to, maybe it's time for Pacifica to evolve after 70-some years of being a radio outlet to being a video outlet. And maybe we need a television station. If anybody out there knows of anybody that has a television station they'd like to give to us, that's how we ended up with the New York radio station, WBAI. Somebody liked what we were doing and gave it to us. So let's go video.
Thank you. Douglas?
After the Watts riots, we had remote radio coming in from lower Los Angeles. We haven't had a good remote in years. I don't quite understand that. I tore a C-band uplink out of the parking lot back in 2001. then gave enough space, carefully structured the space to park a school bus so we could have remote studios. The OR code, which is owned by the Toyota Corporation, is free for everyone. I've spent 10 years trying to get the staff to put a simple block of code on our literature on our front of the building so that you point your phone and the radio starts. For some reason, we can't quite do that. There are ways that we can move into this new millennia, but we don't have to give up the pocket radio, which is where most of my constituency are allowed to be during their workday. Maybe a radio.
Thank you. Jan?
One of the things that's really, that we have, that we really could be using more of are podcasts. We have the ability for people to listen to our programs any time of the day or night. And it's mentioned on the air, but we need to be focusing more, letting people know that they can listen to these podcasts. And by the way, one of the things that we should be doing more often throughout the day is promoting other programs, that each program should have more announcements about what's coming up on different programs. And also, don't forget to listen on the podcast. If you didn't hear Lila Garrett's show this morning at 7 o'clock, you can listen to the podcast. And then each of those podcasts could be also doing a little pitch for money and a little pitch for listening to other programs that are similar. And that's another way to expand our listenership.
Thank you. So the last question will go to Michelle, and this is question number 10. Oh, no, wait, sorry. Where am I? Where am I here? Oh, yeah. It is question number 10. Oh, no, that's the one we just did. Question number 6. I am so sorry. I am so tired. What is your understanding of KPFK's and Pacifica's financial challenges, and how do you propose to resolve these problems?
So I think we've covered a lot of the uphill battle of KPFK, both financially and in other ways. I don't think there's one size fits all solution to the struggles with KPFK. The overhead is too high. The programming needs improvement. We need to discuss volunteers versus paid staff. We need to discuss whether or not fund driving is hurting us or helping us, or both, right? We need to discuss what kinds of donors those drives are getting us, because again, it's my opinion that the donor that is enticed by, the gift is not as committed a donor as the one that is enticed by their passion for the programming, for the passion for the mission of KPFK. So the ways in which we can reorganize and really rethink the way we bring money in from the community are many. And part of that, a big part of that, is ensuring that the community feels represented here at KPFK through volunteer opportunities, through paid programming, paid opportunities when possible, and of course through making sure that the programming represents the voices of the community. I'm, as I said, one of the things I do in the community is co-manage the Bernie's Coffee Shop on Wilshire and Fairfax as an event space, and we have events from 5 to 150 people, and we pass the hat every time. I'm not going to say that sustaining a community center is the same as sustaining an entire radio program, but when we have, events that people can rely on, that they can come and engage with the host and they can access opportunities at KPFK, then we're going to have people that feel engaged with KPFK. And those are people that will then participate on our social media. They'll go find us after they leave a meeting, and they'll make sure to like and follow and share. And if we give them good content, they'll do more of that, because the more that we can provide them content for their followers, the more they're going to rely on us for good content on our social media. And I really believe that this is an all-encompassing mission. When it comes to how we're going to improve funding at KPFK, we need to overhaul our entire thinking of this station.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, this has been a really prime focus of mine since I came into this community. is there are two main conduits we have that bring us money, and that's the premiums during fund drive. The premiums, I don't find are enough to nudge people over the line to be donors. And they have a terrific markup. So it's a good bit of money that we can raise from that. What I'd like to do is to enhance those. I mean, the ones that we have are hitting market saturation as it is. So we've got great investigative reporters who have DVDs and books to disseminate. And I'd like to see us be more of a conduit, more of a beacon for the truth in a society that's sadly devoid of it. Now, we finally gotten our financial situation together, but to handle the threatening debt that we have hanging over our head, we've got to tastefully solicit well-off donors and possibly offer them legacy programming where we can continue to carry on the mission with their spin on it after they've gone on to their reward.
Thank you. Douglas?
KPFT in Houston was offering airtime as a premium. Steve Jobs, one of the last things he did is make sure there's an FM receiver on all of his phones. Most of our phones, pocket phones, have FM receivers, but our common carrier providers refuse to program for them to work. That's no data charge. One of the issues is if you charge at the door, you can't do a live broadcast. If you do a live broadcast, you can't charge at the door. I would very much like to see our live broadcasts for many of these events around town not be charging at the door. That stops me a lot from showing up. And the other thing is I buttonholed an FCC commissioner a couple years ago, pursued him specifically on the idea that KPFK have a subcarrier that broadcast as a internet provider, as a browser, and he said, go for it.
Thank you. Jan?
So, you know, our major financial problem that we have at the moment was caused by WBAI having a lease on the Empire State Building that they were forced into years ago. And we finally settled that case this last year. And we settled it on good terms for the fact that we owed so much money. But nevertheless, we have a huge financial burden. That burden could be eliminated easily if we had a reasonable number of sustainers, people who were willing to donate $5 a month, $10, $15, $25 a month. If we had, I think something like 3,000 donors who are sustainers, we could eliminate that debt, and we would eliminate many of the problems that we have at KPFK. So one of the biggest things that we should be doing is getting people to be sustainers, and there are many ways to go about doing that. I'm not going to talk about those right now because I only have a minute, but this would be a big cure to doing that, along with text to donate, and we could also, there are many ways on the net to raise money, and we should be using all of those, and of course expanding listenership, which means improving our programs. You add all those together, and our debt is extremely solvable, but we have to do all of the above, or most of the above, not everything, but we need to do many of those things, and we can solve those problems.
Thank
Jan
you.
Goodman.
Thank you. Michelle?
So I think we've sort of beat this one. I think a lot of us are saying the same thing. I want to sort of go back to the fact that it's about engaging with the listenership. And, you know, I even have a question about what are we doing with the footage and the audio from this debate right now. I know it's going to go out in an email. Perhaps some of it will be cut up and put on the air from time to time. But I think it's important to explore the different ways that even right now we could be putting out the choices for the local station board out to the community. We can, or we should have done a big push on social media to let folks know that they needed to donate $25 in order to be a voting member of this station. I think a lot of folks don't necessarily know that, and they see their friends and comrades running, and they don't know how to access the election. And I've seen that happen. I saw that happening 3 years ago during the Bernie movement. And so I think, and, you know, Bernie told us to get involved at every level. He told us to run for everything from dog catcher all the way up. And folks started doing that. And a lot of that, you know, was community organizations like KPFK. And so people want to get involved. They're looking for ways to access. And it's on, you know, those of us that are here to open those doors up.
Thank you. So we're going to close this debate, and we'll give you each 1 minute. And by the way, I'm putting this on YouTube, at the very least, on YouTube, on Facebook. But everybody needs to share it, you know, otherwise. Yes. And we can start with Steve Kaiser.
So this is a wrap-up?
Yes,
basically?
your 1 minute statement, closing statement.
Well, like I've said, we had three problems. We've getting better programming. I think we're on the road to doing that and using the programming that's being put on by the other stations. So I'm really optimistic about that. We need better premiums because they're reaching saturation point. That's why these, in part, why the fund drives go on like they do. We've got great sources of this, but we need to push the envelope a little bit and to be a source of information that is true, but it's just not getting disseminated. And it's not going to be disseminated by the current media that's controlled by maybe a half a dozen gargantuan conglomerates. So we need to do that, and we've gotten our financial house in order with better programming. I think we can start bringing people back. But I'm not optimistic that we're going to necessarily have sustainers that just drop in like that. I mean, you can have programs for that, but we're thinking about strategies that are supply push. We've got the supply, so we're trying to push it. What we need is stuff that has market demand. You know, that people want. And there's a lot of information now, that exists that people want and need to know about, and we need to be the conduit to give that to them. And with that market demand, I think we'll bring in a lot better funding, and we'll get back to the good old days that's lasted us this long.
Thank you, Steve Kaiser. Douglas Barnett, 1 minute closing statement.
I went to the Richmond Barney event before he ran for president. I went to most of the events in Los Angeles with tens of thousands of people. But I'm a green. Sorry. Most of the geography of America is covered on the left end of the dial with Christian broadcasts. I have a problem with that. Maybe we won't go into what it is, but Pacifica has historically been in the Supreme Court twice. We need to push the envelope. We need to create the left end of the dial again and again and again. The CPB wouldn't exist except for Pacifica, and I want to see that happen over and over. We need to push out on the left end of the dial so the middle America doesn't have to listen to noise, to the Old Testament. I'm requesting that you vote for me because I'll bring a lot of old ideas and a lot of new ideas to this station. I gave a talk at UCLA as this Trump was elected about replacing air travel in the world with a carbon-free fuel, liquid fuel. That's the kind of changes we need. Thank you. Doug Barnett, your first vote.
Thank you. Jan Goodman.
So I'm Jan Goodman again, and I've mentioned that several times because one of the things that often bugs me when I'm listening to KPFK and other stations, but particularly KPFK, is that so often we're on the air concentrating on the topic that we sometimes forget to have station ID and to ID our guests. And it's so irritating to be listening to someone and wanting to know who it is that's speaking, and you can go 10, 15 minutes and never hear that. So with the idea that this could be on the air. That's why I've identified myself a number of times. There are many, many ways to improve KPFK. The first way, the way that we're talking about right now, is to improve and to stabilize the governance. And please elect me, Jan Goodman, but I can't do it alone. I'm part of a team, and that team has been working together. It's the Committee to Save KPFK. And if you go to candidateslate.com, you can see all of our team members, and including Steve Kaiser and Michelle Manos and myself. And it's very important to elect a group of people who can run KPFK efficiently. So, and to the extent that the LSB does that, which is not a lot, but every little bit helps. So thank you very much, and thank you for voting. Please don't forget to vote, and encourage all your friends to vote also.
Thank you. Michelle Manos? Manos?
Thank you. When I first became an activist, I was warned about burnout. And as a new activist, I ignored those warnings. And I suffered the consequences. I burned way out. And I was perhaps no longer useful for a little while to the movement. When I came back, I had to decide very carefully where I wanted to put my efforts. I've been, encouraged to run for office, but that's not really my thing. I'm not a politician, although I do enjoy politics for the sideshow that it is. And I'm well aware that the local station board here at KPFK is a drama basket, to say the least. There are some struggles to deal with on all sides. And I think that it's important that, you, the voters, understand that for me personally, it was a very intentional decision to run for this local station board. I'm being very careful about where I put my efforts as an activist, because I don't want to experience that kind of burnout again. And I think anybody who's been through that kind of burnout understands how easy it is to feel like you have to be everywhere and do everything, or the struggle for justice will just fall apart without you. The truth is, the struggle for justice takes many forms, and as much as it needs all of us, it doesn't need any of us, because it will continue. The progressive movement will continue, and as people, move on, more people will rise up, and it's on those of us that are here in this moment to create space for the next generation to rise up. And KPFK has such an absolutely incredible platform with which to do that. And I'm really honored to even be considered for your vote. And I'd love all the voters to know that if I'm elected to the local station board, you have my commitment for 3 years to better this station and to ensure that it is used for the struggle for justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And so this closes the fourth KPFK local station board debate. I was joined by Steve Kaiser, Douglas Barnett, Jan Goodman, and Michelle Manos. Thank you very much.